All right, here we go. We are live for the debate of all debates, the epic showdown between Snake Was Right and Christopher Silvius. Do transitional fossils exist, and are they evidence for evolution? Gentlemen, Snake, Christopher, thank you both for being here. How are we doing tonight?
Pretty good.
Yep.
Good. Appreciate you guys being here. And I think this is going to be a lot of fun. So, before I go into the format, I do want to go over some teasers in terms of what we do have in store for everybody over the next month. It is going to be a debate-filled summer. So lots to look forward to. Another epic debate here. We just booked. Snake Was Right himself will be back. Snake, you're a busy man. Dr. Dino and Taylor, same topic, transitional fossils. So that is at the end of the month, as in June. Then we've got the end game. We've got Dr. Dino and Wade the Wizard. This will be round 3. The Evolution Debate Challenge series continues. Also, at the end of June. So you definitely want to be here for that one. The 2022 Evolution Debate Series. It's been prolific. It's been a ton of fun. So we got another one, Atheist Junior and Kent, and of course, Planner Walk and Kent. Next week will be Fox Official. He'll be taking the challenge. Last one I do want to remind everybody about. We've had this one scheduled now, I believe, for 3 or 4 months. And time flies by. This one's coming up quick, June 9th. So major debate on soteriology. Does the Bible teach salvation by faith alone or salvation by faith plus works? Robert Wilkin, Robert Sungenis with a focus on Romans 2:13. I'm pumped for this. So that's June 9th. Okay, enough for me. Why don't we just get into some kind of brief introductions, break the ice, get to know these superstars a little bit before the battle itself begins. Chris, brother, first time here on the channel for a formal debate, that is. So why don't we start with you? How you been? What's going on? And a little bit about your ministry or channel.
Well, my name is Chris Silvius. I'm like a toll booth operator, and I run a YouTube channel called Christopher Silvius. So go over there right now, subscribe, and then come right back. And I guess that's about it. I have a playlist, my debates that I've already done. 2 of them were with Snake, and then the most significant thing on there right now is exposing lies in modern science curriculum. Got like a 2.5 hour show I did with Iger on that. So Snake, it's all yours.
Yeah. So I'm educated in molecular cellular developmental biology. I run a channel called Snake Was Right. It's based the spirit theme of everything. I cover so many topics, but the main theme is basically how knowledge is worth the price. The name comes from the biblical snake. It's kind of a commentary on how I think the knowledge of good and evil is a good thing. But yeah, I kind of try to delve into skeptical topics, inconvenient truths. I try not to toe any political or philosophical lines. I'm kind of all over the place, so check it out.
All right, Taylor, Chris, thanks for those introductions. Your channels are both listed in the description box. So to anybody in the audience, if you like what you're hearing from these debaters tonight, go check out their channels and give them some love and support. Okay, let's go over the format. It is going to be formal, semi-formal. We're going to be having up to 12-minute opening statements. Whatever's not used in the opening statements, we'll put into the discussion. Then we're going to have 6-minute uninterrupted rebuttals, followed by a free-flowing discussion portion for about 30 minutes, where the debaters will be discussing the points brought up in the openings and the rebuttals. Then we're going to have a 5-minute concluding statement. And then this is where we get you guys in the audience involved. We are going to have an audience Q&A. So please make sure you're tagging me with your questions at Standing for Truth, and that way I won't miss them. All right, let's get right into the battle. The battle begins. Christopher and Snake. I'm guessing Snake, being in the affirmative, do transitional fossils exist and do they provide evidence for evolution? You'd say yes. Chris says no. Therefore, I'm guessing we're going to have you start there, Taylor.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay, so here we go, up to 12 minutes. Gentlemen, if you do need to share screen at any point, just let me know and I'll get your slides up there for everybody to see.
All right. We'll check it out. I have... Wait a second. I have the power to share my screen without your permission. Haha.
Pretty impressive.
So,
There we evolution right there. Debate's over. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. So basically, a transitional fossil is any fossil that exhibits traits of both of two different, seemingly different things, both the ancestral and modern forms. And so technically everything is a transitional fossil because from the evolution perspective, because everything is a transition to something else. But so starting off, the problems I have with creationism along this track, at least, is that creationism does not seem to have a way to distinguish between things that just look alike and things that are actually related. It seems to be completely arbitrary. The use of homology is used when convenient. Homology, comparative anatomy, and then just is randomly dropped when convenient. So the question I would have is, how do you decide, for example, that ceratopsians are the same kind, whilst rejecting all the hominid fossils as different kinds, even though the way that baraminologists, creationists get to ceratopsian kinds or horse kinds is through the same comparative anatomy that we use to group hominids together. And of course, anything along the line between two given points would be a transitional fossil. And I will stipulate evolution is not linear. Most of these are branches off of similar looking organisms. So again, to reiterate the point, all of these kinds of dinosaurs, all these types of dinosaurs are considered the same kind by baraminology, and most, if not all, creation organizations. And yet there are huge differences of accepted variation or microevolution within these kinds, and they're only grouped by, again, comparative anatomy. So where is the standard? Where do they draw the lines, and why? Especially when we know that the reshaping of existing bones and muscle groups, in fact, explains the gaps between transitional fossils and what they're supposedly representative or close to transitions of. And basically all fossils in life's history can be explained by the amount of variation that we already know is possible within each kind. So this has actually been mathematically, not just guesstimated, mathematically determined, using
Oh, Snake, let me jump. Snake, let me just jump in there real quick. I would say probably the last 10 seconds you completely roboted out. So if you want to, it could be your slides on the screen taking extra bandwidth. But up till there, you're sounding great. But I just want to make sure the audience hears your argument. So I would say go back about 10 seconds.
Yeah, so I'll probably refer to it just as baraminology from here on, but I just want to make it clear that baraminology is the creationist biblical literature term for grouping kinds together. So this, so using this method, other scientists have been able to mathematically, well, within baraminology, there is also an attempt to mathematically categorize kinds. There is the rebuttal to that, which shows that the distance between these biblical kinds is often smaller than the amount of variation accepted within the same kind, which essentially breaks the method because they're grouped based on their similarity to their anatomical similarity to one another. And so I'll demonstrate with some enhanced visuals. So the colors represent the kinds and the and this is a 3-dimensional. So actually there's multiple views of this, but this illustrates the point best. So they're classified by closeness of anatomy, and but if you see on the left side here, the red lines, I've chosen to measure the distances between them, and that here's to blow it up a little bit. So the morphological distance between this is dinosaurs and birds and early birds. The morphological distance that separates the kinds tends to be smaller than the morphological distances within the kinds, which unifies birds and dromaeosaurs as a single kind. And this is all within microevolutionary change. And the thing with microevolution is that it allows transitional fossils to bridge the gaps between supposedly different kinds. And some of these graphics are from Call Me Emo, formerly Emotionally Stunted Emoticon. He gave me permission to use these because they're very good. He's pretty good at visual design. So as I was saying, if you have these transitional forms that are between two forms and you accept diversity within each kind, that means that the diversity of the transitional form will overlap with the two kinds that it is supposedly between, because the variation within kinds is larger than the gaps. And this is, again, part of the baraminological method, is to find where there are gaps in morphology, except the more fossils we find, the smaller the gaps get. And when we find things that only fit in the gap, we have to presume that there is diversity within that kind as well, and that will overlap, creating a unified kind. So yeah, we have a range of accepted diversity within each kind. So if we take these so-called transitional forms and we consider them separate kinds, that same range of possible diversity must be applied to them as well. But this then overlaps with the organisms that are considered separate kinds, which means they're the same kind. So, but if the transitional forms are said to not be their own kind, but to be as part of either of the kinds that we're looking at, this just shrinks the gap between the kind that we put it in and the other kind to non-existence. Which would essentially mean that there are some members of the kind on the left that will be virtually identical in every way to the leftmost forms in the transitional forms, meaning that there's no gap between them, meaning that, again, that they are a unified kind. So every necessary change between closely similar organisms has already been observed to be possible and is accepted to be possible Finger bones can fuse. Bones can get larger, thicker, change location, orientation, size, number. All these things are already accepted as possible. Transitional forms bridge those gaps even further. And transitional forms are essentially usually predicted by evolution. We can actually fill in the gaps of the fossil record by knowing what happened between the gaps. If we can predict things in detail, we know how they work. That is the scientific method. There is no creationist method by which transitional forms have ever been predicted or could be predicted. Only through homology and evolution was this ever predicted, like with Archaeopteryx, with Tiktaalik. And on top of that, we find these organisms are temporally sequenced in a pattern that shows a transition from older forms to more modern ones. And so either that's true or you have a heat problem. So you have to choose one. At least if the evolutionary history of life is true, we have an Earth. But if it's not true that we can sequence the strata and the fossil record by radiometric dating, then we have a heat problem. We have a molten planet. We don't have a planet to live on. So, at least with evolutionary history, we have an Earth. And this sequential pattern makes fossils function as essentially a three-dimensional video of life history. And of course, it does have gaps. But again, using certain methods, we're able to predict what lies in these gaps, and that makes evolution science by definition. Yeah, Tiktaalik was one of these. And that is essentially the end of my slideshow, but I guess I'll keep going for a little bit. So essentially, kind of part of my approach tonight is to find out what is the method by which you can determine that things are different kinds. So are these different kinds? Are these different kinds? And how could you tell? Are these different kinds, or is the bottom one has just a smaller tail fin? And thus, if you can't draw a line between any of these, how could you draw a line between these, which are the beginning and the end of this series? So, yeah, I suppose I will end there, and we'll put that time into the discussion.
Okay, Taylor, appreciate it. As always, any time not used will go into the open discussion, which is about 3 minutes, 3 minutes-ish. To the audience, I see a lot more people joining the live chat. We will be having an audience Q&A, so just make sure if you got a question pertaining to the topic, tag me at Standing for Truth, and we'll have some fun. Okay, Christopher Silvius, we are going to hand it over to you now. And you have an echo, and you've also got 12 minutes for an opening statement. Do you hear that echo, Taylor, or is that just me?
Yeah, I hear it.
So that's what I sound like, eh? Chris, did you figure that out, brother? Okay, we're good. So, Chris, whenever you're ready, we're going to give you the floor, and we're going to give you 12 minutes for your opening statement. If you need to share screen, we can do so now, and we'll have some fun here.
Yep. All right.
SWE is making fun of the way I say A. I've tried to stop saying A. I just can't. It's in my Canadian genetics. Oh, there we go, Chris.
Yeah. All right, so what I want to figure out in this debate is, are there really transitional fossils, or is this a nested hierarchy? So in order to explain, I want to define some terms here. Transitional fossil is the remains of an ancient life form that evolved from fish to amphibian to reptile to mammal, in that order. So that's what the fossil record essentially is. It's a story of this evolution that took place from a single cell all the way up to the, Professor McQueen at the top. A nested hierarchy basically just looks at the fossil record and sees that there are major and distinct groups of creatures in isolated ecosystems, and they all share similarities, and those similarities kind of ascend, in a progressive pattern from least complex to most complex. But it's not a story of how evolution took place. It's just an observation of basically isolated ecosystems, and the biological complexity will increase with the altitude above sea level. I'll get into that.
Chris, I'm just going to pause your timer just for your slideshow's sake, because you got some text on there. Did you want to? It's up to you. You don't have to, but it might help if you put your slide to full screen, and then that way it might be easier for the audience to read the points you have on the slide. If you want to do that, you just go over to the it should say slideshow, or I do it all the time, but for some reason I can't. Yeah, right there, slideshow. Click it, and then from either beginning or current slide.
All right, let's see if this helps.
But make sure to click it so it goes full screen. Yeah, there you go. That looks better.
All right, so the founder of taxonomy was Carl Linnaeus. He was a biblical creationist, and he came up with all the names of the animals. Okay, some people call him the second Adam, because Adam named all the animals the first time, and he came back and named them all again in Latin, and that's what we call them by. He came up with a theory called the fixity of the species, meaning that animals stay the same and they don't change. If you have a fish, it's going to stay a fish, and it will never evolve into something more complex, or even, majorly less complex than a fish, without dying at least. You're going to have the species, the different varieties of animals will be fixed to a major group. It will look distinct, such as a cow or a dog or a horse. A 5-year-old could basically point it out. Now, the founder of stratigraphy was Nicholas Steno. And if you go to any university in the world, basically your entire first year of geology is going to be covering the work of this guy. He established stratigraphy, basically suggesting the law of superposition. Not suggesting, I mean, it's a fact that the lower layers, the layers of strata on the bottom are deposited first, and then there's a succession. But he didn't believe that it had anything to do with millions of years. He believed that it was all deposited from a global flood. You can read his work, Stenos Prodromus, Geologic History of Tuscany, which is where he lived. It's the history of Earth from the perspective of a global flood. You can go read it for yourself. So what am I saying here? A fossil record would not even be possible without the work of two young Earth creationists. It's a fact of scientific history. They wouldn't be considered young Earth creationists, because not even James Hutton or Charles Lyell was around to even dispute the idea that the Earth was not around 6,000 years old. So, straw man that atheists commonly try to use is that God made it appear that transitions happened, but told us to believe otherwise. It's like he put it in the book that you need to believe, that I made these animals, and that the animals are going to bring forth after their kind. It says it 10 times in the first chapter, but you wouldn't even be able to make that straw man argument about the fossil record if it weren't for the work of those two biblical creationists that established stratigraphy and taxonomy. So there's that. Now, the Ichthyostega and the Eusthenopteron And the tiktolic is what you want to focus your attention on in this slide. The tiktolic is supposed to be a transition in between the Eusthenopteron and the Ichthyostega at the top, because it has fins, but it doesn't have digits like the Ichthyostega, and the Eusthenopteron basically has no fins at all. So it's supposed to be a transition. So here's another illustration of that right here. You can see the radiometric date is kind of in between 385 and 367, even though they're nowhere close to that accurate. You may be able to determine the relative age of strata, maybe around 300 million years, but it's not that precise to where you can put the tiktolic in the middle and then date it with that. So the transitional features of anatomy coincide with transitional ecosystems. Not only do the animals become more complex, essentially the ecosystems, they will change and even become more complex as you rise through the geologic strata. You remember, though, the people who established taxonomy and stratigraphy, they're not going to look at this and think that it's some kind of, evolution. They understood it was a result of a flood. They came up with, articulate and elegant. You can read this stuff for yourself, the explanation that they had for the earth, the animals. But anyways, the ecosystems are going to transition. So you're really not seeing evolution. You're just seeing different ecosystems, which is why in the global flood model, we call it ecological zonation, where the flood destroys all of these animals where they live. And animals generally live together. You go find, bison. They're going to be around a whole lot of other bison. It's not that complex. So the progressive complexity from single cells at the bottom to the thinking Neanderthals at the top is a pure coincidence based on a design feature where biological complexity in the creatures will increase with the ecosystems. They will increase as well, depending on their altitude above sea level. So as you get higher above sea level, higher on land, the animals, the ecosystems, they essentially become more complex. But as far as the transitional features in between, say, the Eusthenopteron and the Ichthyostega, this is actually purely imaginative, because all three of these creatures are a part of the Devonian, and they're all fish. Even the one that can walk around on land that has the digits attached is still a fish. It still breathes through gills. Yes, it has lungs, but it mainly breathes through gills. It's still fish. All of these are still fish, and the radiometric dating, as I said, is nowhere close to that precise. So it's not a transition at all, because they all belong to the Devonian, and that's a bunch of fish. Now, above that, you'll find the amphibians, and that's a completely different, major, and distinct group of animals, nested hierarchy like we talked about. So single cells to the most complex at the top. Is this, evolution, or is this a design feature? Mammal, reptile, amphibian, fish, or vice versa, going from the fish to the top. This is supposed to be a history of evolution, but if it weren't for the work of those two biblical creationists we talked about, you wouldn't even be able to come up with this idea. You wouldn't have a fossil record at all. So how much time do I have, SFT? Is he still there?
Sorry, Chris, I was on mute. You got 6 minutes left, brother.
For real, I got 6 minutes left? All right. I'm going to be able to get through this then. I'm going to give you some logical points to think about if you're a skeptic of, the global flood. The first call to logic is that the entire geologic column would form again if you were to flood the whole world with just soft silica infused mud starting from the ocean floor. So you bury the earth hypothetically with mud that's infused with a cementing agent, and you cover the whole earth, all of it. Well, what you're going to find is a fossil record that looks pretty much the same as the one that we see today. So that's what happened. Is the world was catastrophically destroyed by a flood. That's how you would get a fossil in the first place. That's how you would get a massive graveyard, of animals. They're all living together. They all got killed at the same time. It's called a major extinction event. So the second call to logic is that transitional forms are alive today. It's not like they used to exist. They don't exist anymore. Well, they still exist today, but all these animals that you see here, which looks like a transition from a fish to an amphibian, is actually just a fish, okay? And they produce after their own kind. You're not getting anything different whatsoever. The basal characteristics are common today. Most of them are directly related to their altitude above sea level. Again, animals as they are today increased with complexity. So it's something that was designed. It's something that still exists. It's not like it happened in the past, doesn't happen anymore. It's something that God created, that he established. It continues. The animals will produce after their own kind. So the least and most complex progressiveness, this is a pure coincidence based on biological complexity that increases with altitude above sea level. Hopefully that's making sense. We're going to try to speed through this. Reptiles by themselves are transitionals between amphibians and mammals. If you want to look at it that way, it's, is that an evolution or is that design? And I'm going to tell you that it's not evolution, because in between the major groups of animals are what is known as extinctions. Now, so the Ordovician, which would be the fish, the Devonian, you have the Triassic, which is the the big reptiles, and then in between these major groups of animals, there's geologic strata, which represents a period where basically there's not a lot left alive because the animals before it went extinct. So you're not going to have any fossils. And so there's an absence of fossils in between these major layers of strata. And so they call it a missing link because that's exactly what it is. It's missing. It's not even there. Where you would expect to find the transitions, they're not there. If you have what appears to be a transition, it's going to be a part of one group of animal. So at least 90% of the entire fossil record consists of aquatic animals without a backbone, mostly clams and shells. Only about 9% of the time scale represents land animals, and then less than 1% of that consists of reptiles or mammals. So it looks to me like we have a marine deposit. The geologic column is 100 miles thick, and the thickest naturally existing column is less than 20 feet, and most are less than 2 miles thick. So what you see there on the right is what we actually find, the geologic column that exists in nature, and then the one on the left is the one that they present in the textbooks. So how in the world can you consider your radiometric dates legitimate if there's that much erosion that has taken place with all of the assumptions that go into it? But the point is...
1 minute.
All right. The geologic column is only found in the textbooks. It's just a jigsaw puzzle. It's all theoretical. Dr. Grady McMurtry said if people truly understood what evolution theory teaches, nobody would believe it. Kent Hovind said evolution theory is a dying religion surviving on tax dollars alone. And if you don't like them because they're creationists, Dr. Colin Peterson, who is a senior paleontologist for the British Museum of Natural History, said that I fully agree with your comments on the lack of evolutionary transitions in my book. If I knew of any, fossil or living, I would certainly include them. I will lay it on the line. There is not one such fossil. That's the end of my presentation.
Christopher Taylor, thanks so much for your opening presentations. Clear, concise, great job to the both of you. And I really appreciate the visuals. They are always helpful in a debate. So now we are moving into the rebuttal portion of the debate. We've got 6 minutes for the rebuttals. And in just 1 second, we will hand it to Taylor. I do want to let everybody know in 2 days, we will be back for a soteriology related debate. C.A. Cox from the Synagogue YouTube channel, and David Preston. Interesting topic here. I'm excited for this. Were the Israelites saved by faith and works under the OT? So this will be the first time hosting a debate on this specific topic with that specific title and thesis. So looking forward to that. That is on the 2nd. So 2 days. Okay. Taylor, we're going to hand it over to you. Let me unmute you. And you've got 6 minutes. Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
All right. So comments on the geological column. I'm going to knock that out right away because it's kind of not the focus of the debate. So claims that there is no geological column or that they're not complete is true in most of the world, but there are several instances where the column does go all the way down to the Precambrian. And a couple of examples here are Grand Canyon, of course. Manitoba, Canada goes all the way down to the Precambrian. So we do have these physically in order and we can date them. And the claim that the geological column would form again if the Earth was flooded again, well, one, we would not see the same kind. Definitely not. We could see some layers of mud, but what we're not going to see is these solid layers of rock, especially repeating layers of such as sandstone and limestone, which will lay down, and then several other layers, and then we'll get more sandstone. So if there was any geological sorting in a single event, we would have all the same sandstone or limestone in the same layer. This is not what we see in the actual Earth. Some of the sandstone is formed, has the telltale signs of rock that is formed in dry conditions. Layers like limestone deposit extremely slowly. It would take thousands upon thousands of years to get even one in the Kaibab sandstone at the Grand Canyon would take almost 100,000 years at the best conditions. So, and plus between that, we're going to have each layer solidify in order to have clear boundaries between them. And you're not going to be able to have dry, solid rock being formed in the middle of a flood while there's more mud being dumped on top of it. In addition, soft bodies and ecosystems are not going to be preserved in a global flood, and we're going to have a complete mixing of all ecosystems, of all types of animals and plant matter. Take a look at any flood that happens in contemporary times. Everything just gets completely mixed up. There is no sorting whatsoever. But so that's our geological portion. As far as these transitional forms go, I agree that they are all fish, including humans. But so the thing here is that some of the fish have feet, and some of the fish have skulls that are that are essentially the exact same as amphibian skulls. So you have a fish with an amphibian skull. That is a transitional form because you have the fish kind on one side and the amphibian kind on the other side, and yet there is another thing which has features of both. So, and we would also expect fish that can walk to probably be in a different ecosystem than deep water fish. They would be seen on beaches. That's what we see with fish that can walk in modern forms. So the other point about different and isolated ecosystems is so we have Bengal tigers. We have lions in tigers in India, lions in Africa, pumas or mountain lions in North America. Each one of these are completely isolated and totally different ecosystems, yet every creationist and every creationist organization I've seen says that they are all the same kind. So this is not a variable or a factor that should be able to function as a distinguisher of transitions or of kinds. And so, yeah, so as far as Linnaeus goes, he was a young Earth creationist, but he couldn't actually figure out how to classify humans and apes as different kinds because he was simply using comparative anatomy, and there was no way for him to figure this out, how humans and apes could be separated. So this confused him a lot because he didn't have this theory of evolution. And so there were creationists and Christians that were responsible for, laying the groundwork of classifying organisms. Same with geology. Creationists created modern old Earth geology by changing their minds due to the evidence. So it's the same as when flat earthers figured out that the globe was the true shape of the Earth. It's just scientific progress. So we also had this claim that it's pure coincidence based on ecological systems, but pure coincidence cannot be predicted, and especially not predicted on the basis of ecosystem. And my final question would simply be why all these forms exist that were created just to be killed off in the global flood. God knew ahead of time that he was making most of these organisms just to die off permanently in short order. So that's also very confusing motivation wise. So I had a couple more things, but we'll go over that.
Okay, Snake, appreciate that 6-minute rebuttal. I understand these rebuttals fly by. So, Christopher Silvius, I understand you're fixing your audio, so no problem. Take your time. Just give us the go ahead when you've got that fixed. In the meantime, I will let everybody know I am going to do a video and a post soon. We are trying to change things up a little bit in terms of debates, just add some novel topics to the debates that we host. I think we've hosted now about 181 on all sorts of topics, but we do have, I should say, I have many requests a day that come in through the website from willing debaters. And they'll give me specific topics that they're interested in debating. And so I do my best to try and kind of set them up with an interlocutor. So put the word out. There are a few topics that I'd like to find some debaters for. And one specifically is the Bible version controversy. So I've already got somebody in the chat who said he's interested in that. So that's awesome. And any other topics pertaining to soteriology, dinosaurs and dragons, did modern birds evolve from theropod dinosaurs? Debate topics like this, let me know, shoot me an email, and we'll work at setting you up with Taylor. I know likes that one. So Taylor's always down for a good debate. So, okay, that being said, Chris, how's your audio? Has it improved? Are you looking good, brother? Okay. So, yeah. Anyways, go ahead, Taylor.
Well, if it's a latency issue, you could try just cutting off the video for now. I'm not sure what the issue is. But
ooh. It looks like the debate just turned into a 2-on-1. So,
man.
Snake, hope you're okay.
We got clones open here.
Chris just experienced a whole genome duplication. So we've got 2 Christopher Silviuses taking on 1 Snake was right. Chris, let's hear your audio. Unmute yourself, Chris. Let's check it out. Chris, click the unmute button. Let's test your audio, brother.
How about now?
Yes, you sound good.
All right.
Taylor, would you say that that's evidence for new information? Oh, you're muted, Taylor.
I definitely never seen that before. Live cloning. That's new information to me.
So, guys, share this around. I mean, this debate should get millions of views. You know, live cloning caught on camera. So, Chris, if you're good, brother, we'll hand it over to you. And
yeah, I'm not going to be able to get back on the laptop. It had one. I don't know what happened. The audio went weird, and now it's being really slow. So it's going to be a challenge here to do the rebuttal because I had all these notes, and they are on this phone that I'm using. It's not going to be possible to switch back and forth. So what I'm
happened
going
to
to
your
do?
laptop? Are you saying your laptop died on you?
No, it just kind of froze when I went to fix the audio problem. It happens with that. I'm glad I got through the whole like presentation stuff before that happened, but here we are. I can still kind of do this though. Had some notes.
Okay, well, what I'll do here
Did you?
is
I could remind you of a couple things if you wanted. I don't know if that's breaking the rules.
Yeah,
of the
maybe
debate, but
you could rehash like the first 2 or 3 points that you made. Because
okay, why don't we do this, Chris? Firstly, is there any way you can we can take a 5-minute break and get your laptop working? If not, then that's okay. We'll just rule that out.
well, I'm going to say it's probably going to be a while for this thing to do anything.
We've got 2 angles from you. We know you're not lying. We know you're not lying. There you are checking the laptop.
I don't know why that's coming up.
Okay, let's do this. Let's have you just give whatever you can in terms of a rebuttal. And then once you're done, we'll just go right into the discussion, and Taylor can reiterate some of the points that maybe you lost in your notes, and we'll go that way. Instead of Taylor having to spend 2-3 minutes reiterating everything now, take whatever time you need for rebuttal, then we'll just go into a discussion and address all the other points.
Well, one of the things he said was that the flood would just like mix up everything, like in a local flood just mixes up all of these different things. So any life forms are just going to be mixed together. But a local flood is a lot different than a global flood, especially that of Noah, because not only is it covering the earth and water, it's covering it in mud, rock, and dirt. So it's a rapid, catastrophic, flooding on a global scale. Before the flood, there's going to be a lot more animals is one thing to think about, a lot more than there is today, because today the world is basically 80-90% covered in water, and then there's 10% land, and only a very small part of that we can actually live on because of all the ice caps and deserts. So before the flood, where you have the supercontinent, there's just the earth is filled with creatures, just billions of creatures. So if they, like all animals often do, a major catastrophe or even a local flood, for instance, animals will migrate and try to escape. So they're all going to end up in the same area and then get buried alive. And the only way to really get a fossil is to bury it deep, because you have microorganisms that are going to eat at the flesh and at the bones, and eventually it will be nothing. It won't get fossilized. So it has to be not only a rapid burial, it has to be pretty deep as well. And it can't take millions of years for all that mud to accumulate. It has to happen rapidly so that decay does not occur. That point there that you made I think is the only one I'm gonna be able to remember.
Chris, let me ask you, because I can see you on your laptop. Are you having the issue? Because I've had this before where the computer, as in the program, the StreamYard, it froze up. Is that the problem you're having? Because if that's the case, you can just escape the program and then reboot it and come back in. Or is it your whole computer is crashed?
No, the computer's not crashed. It just started going really slow. I guess you could say it crashed. It's still operating. It's not a very fast pace. I don't know why I'm coming up on there still, because I try to exit out of that.
Yeah, because I can still see your screen share. So I can see you on your laptop. So you're saying the laptop's working. It's just SWE says the computer needs to evolve. A few hundred beneficial mutations should do the job. So, well, okay. Well, you know what? With that being said, let's just go into a discussion. And so we'll take it one topic and one point at a time. And we'll make sure that whatever points Taylor brought up in his opening statement are discussed here in the discussion portion. So, gentlemen, I will start the timer for 30 minutes. And let's hand it to Snake. Snake, you can bring up the first point, first question, first topic, whatever you want to do. And go ahead, gentlemen. Floor is yours.
Yeah, so one of the rebuttal points was about how Tiktaalik as a transitional form would have both fish features and amphibian features, kind of a fish body. It has kind of foot-like fins, but mostly fish body, but an amphibian head. So if that's not a transitional form just based on naming convention, I don't know what would be.
Well, it's a different life form. It's, a different kind of animal, I would say, but it's not land dwelling. It's not amphibious. It's still a fish. So you'd have to classify it as a fish, even though it's a different kind of fish. It's the fact that you find the one that lives closer to the shoreline separated and isolated in a graveyard of fossils that are similar to it. They're isolated from the other ones that are a little lower in the strata, that are actually have no digits and no fins at all. The fact that they're separated, and that they're all a part of one major body plan, which is a fish, this would not indicate evolution, because you're just looking at isolated ecosystems being destroyed or buried by mud, essentially.
But we would expect that, because they are, so everything is a different, well, not everything, but the amphibians and reptiles and mammals are technically all classified as different kinds of fish. So that's kind of the point, is how different can a fish get? And that's why I brought up the diversity within a kind, which is, what is the limit of how much a kind can change within itself? Can a kind of fish have variation that their skull goes from kind of like this to more like this, like an amphibian? And as far as we know, that is possible within kind. Bones can easily change shape, and it has all the parts it needs to become an amphibian. All you need to do is just slightly change the orientation and size of some bones. And amphibians also are born as fish with gills. And so that goes into Evo Devo, but the main point is every transition is only separated by changes that we know can already happen within kinds. So like that's why I asked. So for example, what other kind of fish do you think Tiktaalik could be related to, and how would you know?
What other kind of fish could it be? Well, it's related in the sense that it has a common designer, but not like it's related to the one that came before it because it evolved from it over 10 to 15 million years or whatever. It's distinctly a fish. You're saying that it wouldn't take a lot to go from a fish to an amphibian, but would take quite a bit to go from a fish to an amphibian. There's millions of changes that would have to occur. The fish, for instance, breathes in the water. The amphibian, if it's like an insect, it's going to breathe through its skin. It's not going to have gills, so that's a major change that has to happen, and we don't see that in the laboratory. We, in fact, do not even see it in the fossil record because the fact that there's a major extinction in between the fish and amphibians where there's an absence of fossils, so they literally don't exist.
Don't you accept that a loss of traits and genetic information is possible within a kind?
Yeah.
So couldn't they lose their gills?
No.
Why not?
Well, because there is a limit, and it's, you would maybe say that this limit was like arbitrary because it doesn't really exist. It's just theoretical, but it's something that you can test in the laboratory when you try to breed fish, okay, by artificial breeding experiments. You won't ever be able to reduce the gills down to nothing or change them into something else. You're not going to be able to get the fins to like evolve over hundreds of generations into something that can walk. It's not possible to do. So that's what I'm saying, that microevolution, these small changes, descent with modification, is not going to be capable of removing the gills from a fish because there is an actual limit there.
But how do you know where the limit is? Because it is possible for fish to live on land, and we know that there are genetic diseases where animals are born without specific parts. And, these fish were raised entirely on land, so they could be born without gills due to a defect or a mutation, whatever you want to call it. But since they're able to live on land because they have lungs, it doesn't matter. They're now just, they can reproduce because they don't need gills. So all this is observed to be possible.
No, because the example you're showing is a fish that probably possessed the gills and the lungs both. So losing the gills, it's still able to survive because it has lungs, because it already had the ability to live both in and out of water. It's still a fish, though.
Yeah, exactly. So like, how would you know the difference between a new kind of fish and a new kind, or a different kind of fish with, or sorry, I'm trying to not use the word kind in that context. A different fish. How do you tell the difference between a different fish with a flat head and a completely different biblical kind of fish that has a flat head?
Well, I'm not sure what you're trying. Is there another way you can say that? Because well,
like, how would you tell a fish?
It kind of sounds like,
yeah, how would you tell a fish with a flat head is a new, totally separate fish, or whether it's, oh, did we lose him?
Oh, go ahead, gents.
Yeah, so how would you tell a fish that has the same body as, some other type of fish, but it has a flat head? How would you tell if that was just variation within the fish A kind, or whether it's a fish B?
Well, in the fossil record, I'm going to come at it from two angles. So in the fossil record, you'd be able to tell that they were different because they're separated by a vast expanse of rock and dirt that has nothing in it. Okay, and then living biology, the fishes with the flat heads, and then the amphibians with the flat heads that kind of look like the fish with the limbs and stuff. Uh, you would determine that they are different kinds based on the ability that they have to reproduce. So you may not be able to tell just looking at them, but if you try to get them to mate, uh, they won't do it because they're totally not interested, and that's because they have an instinct to reproduce after their own kind.
But that occurs within kinds that we have that are accepted as biblical kinds, like all these different foxes have different numbers of chromosomes and they don't mate with each other, yet they're still the same biblical kind.
Well, what you're showing is a exception to the general observation. Most of the time we see if we have like two rabbits, well, they can interbreed, obviously. But just because you can find two rabbits separated by hundreds of miles, on two completely different continents, and they can no longer interbreed because they've been, away from each other for hundreds, if not even thousands of years, they've been separated. So something in the gene pool is not, it's preventing them from reproducing, but you could still tell that they're the same kind, and that would be an exception to the general observation. Generally, what we see is if it's the same kind of animal, if you look at the DNA and it's 99.98% identical, they are capable of reproducing, or were at least.
Okay, but that standard includes apes and humans together. But it seems like you're talking about comparative anatomy and not the ability to reproduce, because there are tons of exceptions to this ability to reproduce, either preference-wise, location-wise, or even genetics-wise, because there are rabbits with different number of chromosomes who physically can't reproduce. So it seems like you're using anatomy, but I still don't know where this line actually is. And going back to the fish, there are blind fish in caves that have like these degraded eyes that they don't use and they can't see out of. So, I mean, I guess you agreed if a lungfish lost its gills, that would be fine. Would you agree that a lizard could lose its legs over time? Is that possible?
Lose its legs entirely to where it was like a snake? I'm going to have to say no, but if you could show me an example of a lizard that completely lost its leg and it just slithers around, what you have is a reduction of information and not an increase, and it's still not going to be able to reproduce with a snake. It's still going to have a fellow legless salamander in order to reproduce.
Well, so what I'm showing is creation.com and Answers in Genesis agreeing that loss of legs in a lizard or snake ancestor is not is creation possible. But yeah, let me find the pictures of those lizards real quick, because what we would be talking about is a slow, over generations, the lizard's legs getting smaller and smaller. And so we have examples of all kinds of lizards. They're all transitional forms because let's see if I can find it. Because they're along the entire spectrum of lizards with large legs, lizards with intermediate legs, lizards with teeny tiny legs, and lizards with legs that are not even legs, they're just stubs, and then lizards that are lizards, not snakes, that have no legs at all. But let me see if I can find those for you. Go ahead and respond, if you would.
I feel like if I responded, I would end up saying the same thing I already said. So I don't know. I guess how to respond to that, because it's the way that you're going to determine whether or not a major change can take place is if you can actually demonstrate it in the laboratory or show that it happened with ancient life forms. I don't think either of those are possible.
So, for example, I'm showing Tetrapodophis, which was considered universally by every creationist organization to be a snake ancestor and to be a snake based on its skull. And yet it has tiny legs that are considered by mainstream to be transitional in form, because this would seem to be a transition between a legless snake and a snake ancestor that had legs. And it's just interesting that, you know, creationist organizations consider this a snake and yet deny that transitional forms exist, because this is an example of a snake that it has vestigial legs, because you can't walk around on those things. You can see at the bottom the whole organism. Its legs are right near where the snake's hip bones are, and they're tiny. They can't support their weight. And it's also interesting that they classify that as a snake based on its skull and also its body and rib shape. But creationist organizations also consider the earliest snakes to be snakes based on literally what I'm showing here is lower jaw fragments and vertebra and nothing else. So they're using anatomy to determine whether it's a snake and whether it's related to other snakes or not. And they're doing it for what's quite obviously a transitional form.
I don't think that it's a transitional form. I think that it's a lizard, for instance, that has lost its legs, but they're still attached. They're just like a lot smaller, and it has to slither around now. It's able to adapt to its environment, but it's not technically a snake because a snake has no legs. You can look at certain types of anacondas and find little horns that are on the like close down to the bottom of the tail. On the belly of the snake, there's little horns, but those are used for mating. You know, reproductive purposes has to do with getting baby snakes, and not like it evolved like a snake was walking around on land at one point, or like it was once a lizard. Because in no experiment ever has a lizard produced anything other than a lizard.
So the Creationist Ministries I mentioned earlier both consider that that Tetrapodophis to be a snake because of its skull. It doesn't have a lizard skull; it has a snake skull, and those skull fragments they also consider to be snake fragments because they don't look like lizard; they look like snake. And here's the reference for that. So, I mean, if you want to state that this is not actually a snake just because it has legs, I mean, you'd be disagreeing with every creation ministry. I don't know if you want to, you know, give a reason for that, or
I'm not familiar with this topic at all. So I'm going to have to pass on this topic since I don't have enough information to respond any further.
All right. Well, here's a.
What we could do, gentlemen, I'll jump in real quick. It's up to you. Since we're more than halfway done the discussion portion, did we want to have Christopher Silvius ask a few questions now and kind of lead the way with Taylor? Chris, you asking a few questions to Taylor?
Yeah, what do you think, Taylor?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, Snakey. What would convince you that the fossil record is evidence of a global flood? If anything would convince you, what would be the number one observation or discovery that would make you change your mind?
Well, it would be hard to give me some new information that could cast the current information in that light. But if the information that we had was different, essentially, and well, could you repeat it again so I know the precise question? Like,
if I had the evidence to show you that a global flood created the fossil record, what do you think I would be presenting you? You know, if you were to have to conjure up evidence for yourself to prove that the flood occurred, and that's what the fossil record is, what would that be?
So just a global flood, if all the animal types were mixed up, if there weren't repeating types of rock layer, probably less rock layers, like all the limestone layer in one. If the limestone layers were significantly smaller, if there were no strata that had to be formed in dry conditions, at least under the, the top couple layers, things like that.
I've heard it said that if I could show you, for instance, something that is at the top of the fossil record, way down here at the bottom, like if I show you human bones or mammoth bones in the same layer of a trilobite index fossil, would you say that would be pretty convincing? Like on a scale of 1 to 10, how close would you be to changing your mind?
Depending on, so if you just show me something I can't vet, closer to 1. If we can determine that with vigorous scientific methods that yes, indeed, this isn't a fake, this isn't a mistake of some kind, yeah, it would be pretty convincing. If more so a human, but a lot of these, there's a limit. So human would be closer to 10, but there were examples of like mammals found together with early dinosaurs, less convincing, because that would just inform us. Well, we do know that did happen, but it was thought that mammals were kind of a thing that came after dinosaurs, but also that all that would show is, well, mammals showed up earlier than we thought before. But if it's something as completely different as a human in the Precambrian, that would be pretty convincing. The other thing I didn't mention is obviously radiometric dates. They're progressively different for the different strata. If they were much closer together, that would also be convincing.
Well, I'm going to call your bluff because I don't think that there's much of anything that could convince you. If you find, when they find dinosaur soft tissue, that's been preserved, like in the bone, like collagen and stuff, and it can only last for like 100,000 years max. And it's supposed to be in 65 million year old strata. Then somehow the conclusion is, how did this survive for millions of years? That's what they start thinking about. Or if they hear of some dinosaur that was discovered in the Congo swamp somewhere, they think, well, wow, it must have survived all of these millions of years. It's like you're not even capable of considering the other position. I'm thinking that you may be biased, so I don't want to say that you're a liar, Snake, and I'm not going to. I want to be respectful in this debate, but I mean, there was a iron pot that was found in a lump of coal, supposed to be, during the Carboniferous era. There's been a hammer found in 140 million year old Cretaceous limestone. There's been bacteria found in crystals that are supposed to be hundreds of millions of years old. There's dinosaur and human tracks that are intersecting, left to right consecutive patterns. So how can you just brush all this away or sweep it under the rug somehow? Or do you think that all of those examples that I gave, which is just a small list, are just hoaxes?
Some of them have been hoaxes. I don't remember all of them, but like the iron pot in a lump of coal, like a lot of them, like I said, I would have to verify them. I can't necessarily just take your word for it, but assuming, there was actually an iron pot found in a lump of coal, off the top of my head, I think that would be explainable by people have been mining coal for a long time, and maybe someone dropped an iron pot in there. And as far as a biblical timeline, the Iron Age was after the global flood, right? So that doesn't seem to line up with your version of events either. It seems like the same kind of explanation would need to apply to both. I do especially love the human and dinosaur tracks. I made a whole video on it because dang, if I could find my slides for that, I'll put them up. But essentially what you have is one line of tracks going for a while: dinosaur, 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 human, dinosaur, 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 dinosaur. So it could look like a human footprint, or it could look like a dinosaur footprint that kind of the sand collapsed near the fingers, and so all you have left is that kind of human foot shape. But if we're going to assume that it's a human shape, then it was a dinosaur walking along, one of its feet became a human foot in the middle of it walking, and then it morphed back into dinosaur foot mid-stride. So that's the Paluxy River, I think, that I'm referring to. Maybe you're talking about a different one. But so all of those ones that I've looked into, whether they're hoaxes or there's some alternative explanation, and I don't want to go on too long, but there's, as far as the soft tissue in dinosaurs, it wasn't soft when discovered. It had to be treated to become soft and pliable. It had to be treated with chemicals, but there's no data on how long collagen or heme fragments could survive. Like it's just assumed that, those would have degraded by now. But there have also been preservation techniques to figure out that these things can become stable over long periods of time. Dr. Mary Schweitzer did those experiments. And yeah, so the heme fragments is like the core of heme and hemoglobin is iron. So it's pretty easy to preserve minerals using other minerals. Lots of proteins are made have mineral elements in them. So the soft tissue is really just proteins and protein fragments that are mineralized. So that makes sense. And we don't have 100,000 year experiment running and saying that, this can only survive this long. But we do have experiments showing that they can become chemically stable by natural phenomena. Yeah, go ahead.
Chris, I think you're on mute, brother.
Okay, there I am. You say that the tracks are one human footprint every, I don't know, 10 or 20 dinosaur tracks. So you just find them basically scattered throughout the dinosaur tracks. But you can look with your own eyes at the you go. I don't know if you've ever been there, but you can go to the Creation Museum that's in Texas, and when they dried out the river, the Paluxy River, and exposed this layer of limestone with the left to right consecutive patterns, human footprints, left, right, and then the dinosaur footprints right beside them, they actually excavated an entire block of it and put it on display at the museum. So it's not just like you have one human footprint scattered through a bunch of dinosaur tracks. It's actually a left to right consecutive pattern. And even if you did have, which you probably do have, just human footprints that are scattered, like what you're talking about, that probably exists, but it's not that there was some kind of like erosion that took place to make the dinosaur footprint look human, but rather the dinosaurs probably stepping in the smaller human tracks. And one of the great examples of that is a track that actually has a human footprint and a dinosaur track where the human stepped into the dinosaur track. Now, when the opposite happens, though, a dinosaur steps into a human track, it's not going to leave any evidence whatsoever that the human had ever steps there. So examples you're talking about, it's probably one of those circumstances. But you can't dispute the fact that there are left to right consecutive footprints of humans and dinosaurs because you can touch them, literally hold them in your hands.
Yeah, and they look exactly the same as the ones that are interrupting the dinosaur footprints, and half of them do have like that infill where you can see where the toes were, but it looks like scrunched together, so it's just a thin line between the sand or the rock. And then some of them have a full toe, so it does look exactly like erosion. And yeah, some of the ones that are like claimed to be fully human have some of those footprints that have the three toes within the same line. So no matter which tracks you look at, it's a track of something walking that's, if they're human and dinosaur, they're either a dinosaur that's morphing into a human sometimes, or a human that's sometimes morphing into a dinosaur. So because a dinosaur wouldn't be walking along and making no footprints and then step once on top of the human footprints and then just kind of disappear entirely. But this is kind of off topic for transitional forms at this point.
Yeah, so back to transitional forms then. Would you dispute what my claim that there are no transitional fossils where you would expect to find them in between major geologic eras, I guess, like Jurassic and Devonian? There's an absence of fossils, like you won't find any in between.
I mean, they're all technically transitional forms. But so like within like ceratopsians, they've found transitional ones that they thought bridged older and younger ceratopsians. It's less of a thing within dinosaurs because dinosaurs are already kind of have, creationists already kind of accept that dinosaurs have separate kinds and they seem to be well defined, but there are transitions between ceratopsians and, or I'm not sure if it's ceratopsians, but four-legged dinosaurs and two-legged dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And then what? So yeah, I'm not sure which geological era the early birds are from. Not as well versed on the geological eras, but
Well, I put up a quote of the senior advisor for the British Museum of Paleontology or whatever, and then you have Stephen Jay Gould claiming that there's basically no transitional fossils. And the reason that they say that is because it is an observable fact. If you look for humans and apes, for instance, you'll find a graveyard of human fossils, or you will find a graveyard of ape fossils, and they are distinctly different from one another. There's no transition whatsoever. And
then
if
you'll
you were to look, all right, go ahead.
then you'll find some fossils that have ape features and some human features. There are fossils that have, the locking knees of humans, but the rest of the skeleton is more ape-like. Or you'll find ones that have human-like skeletons, but ape-like arms and stature. So there are mixes of these features, and that's what they call transitional forms, is when you have the features when there aren't.
Taylor,
Something happened to your audio.
could be your external mic, Taylor. Your audio just went out. But you didn't mute yourself, so it must be something with your external mic. Try unmuting and we'll see.
Did I cut out for a second there?
Yeah.
You're good now, though. You're good.
I can't hear you now. Let me see what's going on.
Because I'm not the only one with audio problems.
I'd make a joke, but somebody in the chat said, no joking around. Not during this debate. Okay. No horsing around, kids.
This is
You're going
serious
into
business.
tension. Are you able to hear us now? Okay. I'm guessing you can hear us now,
Yeah.
Taylor.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
What
And I will say we got
out?
5 minutes left in the discussion. So whatever you gentlemen want to discuss, make sure we do so now in the final 5 minutes. Go ahead.
I think we can stick to the, just kind of hash this out as far as we can go. You have what appears to be bipedal apes. And so you'd say that appears to be an ape, transitioning into a human because of the human-like feature that the ape is taking on. But still, what you're looking at is an ape. So regardless if it has human features or not, you're still going to find it in the ape category. When you look in the fossil record, it will be an ape, most of it, even if there's an exceptional attribute which appears to be human.
But there's like dozens of them across the whole spectrum that have basically a mix, any type of mix of characteristics that you can find. So that's why they're called, and you can't really, it's like a gradient. There is no one that you can pick that is fully human or fully ape. There's a ton, most of them actually have a mix of these features. And the other thing I said before I cut off was Archaeopteryx was in the Jurassic. I don't know if that was one of the ages that you mentioned, but that's definitely a major transitional form.
Well, there may be a lot of them, but that just kind of shows that there was a lot of that kind of an ape. There's a lot of dinosaur fossils, but none of those exist anymore. They went extinct, and they're no longer here. But that doesn't make it so that they evolved into something else, because no animal today has the ability to do that.
So what would be the hard line between ape and human? Because even Linnaeus couldn't figure that out. And we've only gotten more fossils since then that fill in gaps way more and more and more.
All right. Well, Linnaeus, I guarantee you, he was not confused by this. The fact I don't even know like a lot on that, honestly, but he classified humans as Homo sapien. I'm pretty sure, and I mean, did he not give a different name entirely to the apes?
Yeah, but he couldn't figure out how that they were not part of the same kind.
Well, I don't know why he wouldn't have been able to figure it out. He was a pretty smart guy, a lot smarter than I am, and I can figure it out because an ape uh, cannot write a William Shakespeare novel. It cannot even build a fire to cook a piece of meat on successfully.
But all the difference between us are almost negligible. It takes someone who's trained for years and years and years to point out the major differences, especially within the transitional forms. There are ones that, without an untrained eye or without the rest of the body, you couldn't tell whether this is a Neanderthal skull or a skull of a human with just a very heavy brow line. There are specimens that have, I think some of the Australopithecines, they have the human jaw right here, but have kind of more of an ape-like body, but they have walking knees. So where, like, I'm not sure where the actual line can be drawn.
Well, I think it's
and we know
obvious.
all those changes. We know all those changes are possible within microevolution.
No, it's not possible with microevolution to produce, language or to,
Well, chimpanzees do have language, and they have different sayings per region. Like they have different vocalizations. They have different cultural practices. Some of them use spears for hunting. Some of them use rocks. They have different hierarchy practices, war practices between chimps. Orcas have been shown to have different languages, like even more sophisticated than chimps. And
right, but in no
they
case
also
does
carve
that have.
art into rocks. Like there's animals do some pretty smart things.
Yeah, they do. The apes, they definitely do have human characteristics, but the examples that you speak of are minor similarities. You need like a major similarity, like an example of, a monkey being able to get a flint rock and strike it on another and then put it next to some dry grass and light it on fire. That would be a pretty major uh, accomplishment for an ape, I would say. But so far, I'm pretty sure that no ape has been able to conjure up fire. Maybe with a lighter they can do it, but that's just mimicking a human. They're never going to actually go out into the wild and use these features on their own, like sign language, for instance.
Well, most of the stuff we do is mimicking other humans. So it's like we stand on the shoulders of the generations before. And that's why different chimp tribes have different practices, because they watched their parents and they watched their parents. But there does seem to be a major gap between human and chimp intelligence. But then we have evidence of fossils with larger brain cases than our typical apes today, that are apes, but they have larger brains. And then apes with larger brains with human-like knees, and then apes with more and more human-like skulls and locking knees and shorter arms.
Well, I
And it
would
goes
say
the whole
that you're.
spectrum, and they're within the time period that we would expect, and that's why they're called transitional forms.
There is a spectrum of brain size increasing, on paper, but actually in the graveyard of fossils, what you're going to find is a mix of all of these different brain sizes, and you put it into a textbook in the order that you like and draw lines on paper because it makes your theory look good. But in reality, the increase in brain size is just a demonstration of variety happening within the different kinds of apes. There's apes today with smaller brains than others that may be even a little smarter.
But
But
it's a consistent larger brain case than even the variation that we see in modern apes, and it co-occurs with all these other traits. So you can group. It's not just, well, this skeleton happens to have a large brain, so we're going to place it here. But no, it shares all the suite of features with all these others, so we can group them together. It's like, so the ones that have the locking knees and other features also have the bigger brain. So it's not just some random monkey that happens to have a larger skull that we're sticking in there. It's a whole species that have this trait as a normal thing, and we can tell it's a whole species because they share these other traits that aren't found in modern forms of apes or humans or other extinct hominids. There are groups of these things, but there are groupings, but the differences are relatively minor when you take into account that we know that there can be major shape changes in especially skulls. Like, just look at dogs.
Okay, Chris, we're going to give you a final word in the discussion. Take as long as you want to respond to Taylor. Then, Taylor, for your response, I'm sure there will be something you want to address. We'll save that for your 5-minute closing. And then Chris, he'll get a 5-minute closing. So go ahead, Chris. Anything you'd like to respond to there? The floor is yours.
Well, again, you have a lot of examples in the ape fossils of various species of apes with larger brain cases, and then they have these other attributes too. So they may have more or less human features than another kind of ape, but they're in the same layer of strata, and you can put them in the correct order, and it does make like logical sense to an evolutionist if you're looking at it from that paradigm, and that seems to fit your theory. But what you want to do is have a collection of all of the evidence, and it has to all corroborate, or however you say that word. So I'm thinking that you have in the fossil record, I'm not thinking, this is the fact, you have an ape or a bunch of apes together. Some of them have more or less human characteristics than others. And then you have an entirely different graveyard of fossils that has humans. And the transition that is supposed to be there doesn't exist because of the fact that all of the fossils are very, very fragmentary. You could probably put all of the so-called ape to human transitional fossils in the back of a pickup truck and it wouldn't even fill it up.
Okay, Christopher, appreciate that final response. And we are now moving into the concluding statements. And then we've got some solid audience questions. We've had multiple live chat side debates going on. So a very engaged chat, always fun to see. So Snake, we're going to hand it over to you. And you have 5 minutes for a concluding statement.
All right. Yeah, so I did want to get to birds, but we'll have to do that as a separate topic because they are expansive on their own. Yeah, I don't think I've gotten to a couple of these notes. So I wanted to address that concerning what we'd expect from floods. Local floods also dump mud. We wouldn't really expect a global flood to look that different. So again, we shouldn't expect a pattern that's solely predictable by evolution. We would expect no pattern at all, really, other than maybe some animals that can survive in crazy flood, muddy conditions. Maybe like whales would survive and die less than other animals. That's about it. And remember, we have these fossils in temporal sequence. The only exception being the heat problem, that if our radiometric dating doesn't work, the Earth would have melted down hotter than the sun, etc., etc. I know Chris and I talked about that once. You guys should check that one out. As far as transitional fossils not fitting in the bed of a truck, that's not true. There are hundreds of specimens of hominids alone. And Archaeopteryx, there's a ton of proavians. Let's see if I've got any. Well, yeah, there's a lot of those. There are a lot of dromaeosaurs that have wings and appear that they're pretty much like Archaeopteryx. There's a lot of them coming out of China. I know, don't trust the Chinese with everything, but I think most fossils are pretty rigorous scientific evidence. And yeah, I did want to get to birds, but that's why I want to have a birds or dinosaurs topic all on its own, because that I just didn't want to dip my toes into it unless I got to go deep into birds. So I guess I'll reiterate my original question, which is like, how can you tell where the amount of variation stops and where it can keep going? So these two animals seem like they're both terrestrial, kind of wolf-like. They have fangs. The other has a little bit larger hands, a little more paddle-like, maybe better suited to swimming, but largely the same type of animal. How do we tell whether these are related or not? By creationist standards that they're using within kinds, certainly they would be, but again, the separations are really quite arbitrary. I'll give one example. Is with horse and tapir kind. Creationists organizations accept that the four-toed, three-toed horses are indeed ancestors of the modern one-toed horses, yet these horses, four-toed horses, are exactly the same as tapirs, and yet they classify these as different kinds. So it seems like there is a double standard for what is and what isn't in the same kind, and so this messes with how they understand transitional forms. So back to the whale transitional forms, these should be the same kind. These should also be the same kind because they have exactly the same anatomical features by the standards of creationists and baraminology. The one on the bottom just has smaller legs and a bigger tail. Fine, that's definitely possible within creationist accepted morphology and variation. Same here. It's got tail is pretty much the same size, but its hind legs are smaller and its front legs are a little more stiff, paddle-like. Again, we've seen this variation within kind before. And yet, at this point, they're looking completely different from what we started as. And so we have these forms in the middle that bridge them, that all should be the same kind, yet they bridge different kinds. That is what a transitional form is. I rest my case.
Okay. Taylor, appreciate the 5-minute concluding statement. Christopher Silvius, we are handing it over to you now for your 5-minute concluding statement. Whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. Just make sure you unmute yourself and you're good to go.
I think the point that you're really trying to drive home here is the fact that you can't, or I'm not going to call it a fact, it's not a fact, but you can't tell the difference, basically between one animal and another, because the similarities between them are so striking but they can't reproduce. And from the outward appearance, it's obviously like a different kind of animal. One is swimming in the water, and one is still up here walking around. And you may even be finding it in the same layer of strata, for instance. But the way that you can tell, you're saying that you're having a hard time distinguishing where the actual boundary is in between the one and the other. Well, the boundary, again, and I'm just going to repeat this, even though I've already said it. So, and I don't mean this like disrespectfully. I'm just trying to break this down to an elementary level the best way I can, fourth grade level. So, in the fossil record, when you have major groups of animals, you find them together and you find them separate from others. So where you would expect a transition, there's a complete absence of fossils. So if you want to determine if one fossil is different from the other, when you look at the fossil record, you just look at that void that's in between them where nothing is happening, and there's no fossils. So there's no transition whatsoever. That would indicate they're a completely different kind. And then you could look at animals that are alive today that have similarities, and you can tell that they're a different kind based on if they will reproduce or not. And even if you can find an exception where it's obviously the same kind, but they're not reproducing anymore, that doesn't mean that they used to be able to, that they, in the past, they weren't able to reproduce. It's that they were originally able to reproduce and lost that ability. So the exception that you've brought doesn't compromise the general observation that if you find two animals that are obviously 99% identical as far as DNA and even the outward appearance, they're going to be able to reproduce. So that's how you tell the difference. Even if there's a striking similarity, which makes it completely, like, just from the outward appearance, you would think you can't tell the difference. If you're just looking at the skeleton, they have so many similarities that you can't tell it's a different kind of animal. But if you put skin and bones on it, you look at where the animal would have lived and what it would have ate and stuff, the ecosystem, you could tell it's a different kind of animal. You look at animals that are alive today, you can obviously tell it's a different kind of animal. So, you have to look at more than the skeleton in order to be able to tell it's a different kind of creature. It's not just a matter of looking at the bones, it's a matter of biology. And again, after this debate, go to Christopher Silvius and subscribe, like, ding the bell, and kick the dog. And thank you for watching this debate. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to questions if we're going to do that part of the show. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Chris. Gentlemen, thank you for a fun debate. I'm glad that we made it work. Very good discussion. And the discussion portion flew by. I looked at the timer, and although we were going to do 30, we did about 50 minutes and a lot of interesting points discussed. So here we go. Let's get into some audience questions, and we'll give you, gentlemen, a 25-second break here. I'll let everybody know the next few shows, which is just a snapshot of the overall events we do have scheduled on the channel. So please, if you're not yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button and share around this content, as the truth is important and critical thinking is important. So first week of June is going to be packed. So we've got the Evolution Debate Challenge series continues, Kent and Fox official. In 2 days, we've got CJ Cox from the Synagogue YouTube channel and David Preston, where the Israelites saved by faith and works under the OT. And on the 3rd, we've got Slaying Heresy. Last month, we had an episode in this series with Anthony Rogers. We discussed the Trinity. We refuted oneness. And this time, we're going to have Kelly Powers. And we are going to be countering the Jehovah's Witnesses. And Let me see here. Again, this is just a snapshot of everything we have going on. Okay, here we go. On the 9th, Wilkin and Sungenis, the great salvation debate. So here we go. And Christopher kind of, here we go. Okay, Christopher is back. Threw me off a little bit. Thought you were raptured, Chris. Can you hear us, brother? Okay. All right. Well, let's get right into the first question. He's just left me a note saying he's going to be gone for a couple minutes, so no worries. Okay, here we go. Snake, we'll just make sure we get a question for you, and we'll get it up on screen. Question is right here. Question comes in from George Bond. Question for Snake Was Right. How can the MO1 bacteria develop 7 flagella with interconnecting gears billions of years before the single flagella bacteria?
Could have lost some flagella. Might have been more efficient to just have a single one that worked better than a bunch of them that were smaller and less efficient. And the flagella was probably evolved from a simpler form of an injector protein. So it's always modification of something that came before it.
Okay. Taylor, appreciate it. Christopher, anything you want to add or move to the next question?
How can the MO1 bacteria develop 7 flagella with interconnecting gears billion? Oh my. I don't know if I can follow that one. You know what? Let's skip it.
Okay, here we go.
Sorry, George Bond. I couldn't put my input on that.
No worries, brother. It's a question for Taylor anyway, so you guys aren't obligated to add your thoughts. But here on this channel, we always do give you guys the opportunity to add some points to the questions. And in order to move along smoothly, whoever the question is for, will give them the last word. Okay, so here we go. Whoops. Okay, Cool Jesus. Cool Jesus always has good questions. Appreciate this question. So question is now for Chris. Looks like we've got a healthy balance of questions for Snake and questions for Chris. Okay, so he asked, if ecological zonation is how the flood sorted animals, why do we have clams and salamanders in Mesozoic and Cenozoic fossil layers?
Well, because in a global flood, of course, you're generally gonna have all the animals clustered together in one place, and they're all gonna die in a catastrophe. But once that happens, because we're talking about global flood, 200-foot tidal waves, etc., some stuff is gonna get mixed up, and you would have examples such as this one right here, and then the Ashley phosphate bed, which basically has every body plan, including dinosaurs and humans, in one layer of geologic strata. But that doesn't compromise the general observation that ecologic zonation is a reality.
Chris, appreciate your answer. Taylor, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just say the strata and fossil record often does not follow any pattern of ecological sorting. But it always follows a pattern of evolution, which is why evolution can be used to predict gaps in the record and not ecological sorting.
Okay, Chris, question was for you. You get the last word.
Well, can you help me out on the Snake? Mesozoic and Cenozoic, are those different periods? Like, how much time is in between those? Because I'm not familiar with those. Like, what's the significance of the clams and the salamanders being in those particular layers of strata?
Different ecology.
Okay, different ecology. I don't know. Doesn't that make sense with ecologic zonation then, if they're in different zones? You know, if they're found in a major group?
And Chris, before we move on, people are asking, I guess the link that I have for you in the description box, I don't think it's working. So if you want, after the debate, you can send me an updated link and I can add it to the description box for people.
All right. Well, are you linking my old channel?
That might be the case. So I'll get your new channel and I'll put it in the description box for people.
I don't even know how you're doing that since it's been deleted, but yeah, it could be it.
It was probably, oh, you know what? Because I probably originally did the description box months ago when we set the debate. So no worries. I'll get your updated one and I'll add it to the description box. Okay, so we got a question here from Nori Davis. Question for Taylor. What does he mean exactly by the statement amphibians are born as fish? He does realize that is scientifically demonstrably false. DNA doesn't lie.
So yeah, I can always be a little bit more technically correct. I try to kind of talk in layman's terms, but what I mean by that is tadpoles. So amphibians are born as tadpoles, which resemble mostly fish in all their anatomical features. There is a lungfish. Its young are indistinguishable. An African lungfish indistinguishable from an African frog, whose tadpoles look exactly like this lungfish, which has like catfish whiskers. The frog's tadpoles have those whiskers, and they lose them as they grow up. This is a part of Evo-Devo where things are born with, or they go through developmental processes in the womb that show kind of their evolutionary history. And that's significant because a lot of these features are lost when the fetus or juvenile grows up and becomes an adult. Like there are whiskers in whales that also just mysteriously disappear. So they go through, because it's DNA left over from their previous ancestors. So but amphibians are fish, and this is demonstrably true because of DNA and morphology. So it's the twin nested hierarchies. So even if there was some random coincidence that we could trace through transitional forms and build a phylogeny based on anatomical features, comparative anatomy, the coincidence kind of falls apart when DNA makes that exact same nested hierarchy that shows that amphibians are genetically closest to fish and genetically closest to the amphibians that are anatomically closest to fish as well. So that is demonstrably true, in fact.
Okay, gotcha. Chris, if there's anything you wanted to add, go ahead.
Oh, well, if I would say that these nested hierarchies exist, but there's no transitional fossils, okay, to like connect them. There's major distinct groups and they share similarities, and the complexity increases as you go higher. But this is a design feature. It's not, like evolution. You wouldn't even be able to have a fossil record, as I said, without those two biblical creationists. So it's not like a something where you would look at it and say, wow, it looks like, these frogs, because in the early stages of development, when they first come out of the frog womb, if you want to call it that, they look like fish. And so they must have evolved from fish, because you have the fish down here and the frogs up here. So that had to happen. But that's just one way of looking at it. And it's interesting to look at it that way, but you need more evidence than, a frog, which starts out as a fish. It could start as a fish, but the thing about that is You ain't going to get a frog from a tadpole. You have to have the frog to get the frogs. I don't know how something like that could have evolved in the first place.
Well, there is this nifty thing called a frogfish, which is I've showed it many times in many debates. It's a fish that looks like a frog. And while I answer the rest of this question, I'll show it to you. Its fins have been modified in a way that look exactly like frog limbs. But to address the claim that it's a design feature, I mean, that's basically just pure speculation. We have all this evidence of the fossil record and the twin-nested hierarchies of genetics and comparative anatomy. And Evo Devo, which lines up perfectly with the twin-nested hierarchies and the fossil evidence, where the thing is born more or less as a fish, and as new genes turn on, it sprouts limbs just in the same order as they acquired them in the evolutionary history. All these things lining up, being a coincidence because of design, is just speculative and seems very far-fetched.
Okay, we'll give Snake the final word there since it was his question. So here we go. Super chat from SWE. Appreciate it. What does Chris, so question for you, what does Chris think of the whale transitional rhodocetus? The pelvis is connected to the sacral vertebra, so it could walk. The ilium was small, which means it could swim. A clear transition.
Man. Well, all right. We'll go there. We'll entertain this. So let's just imagine that the whale is it used to walk around on land. You know, I can't really imagine it too well. Imagine a whale walking around, but they say that it's true in the fossil record because we have, or in reality, like today, whales have this pelvic bone, and they say that it's reduced legs. So these legs got smaller and smaller and smaller over millions of years until it's basically they're not even there. And so because of that, then they say that the whale had to evolve from a land-dwelling creature. But in reality, if you know your whale anatomy, those bones are used in reproduction. The mechanism to maneuver the giant whale penis is those bones. Okay, they're very strong, so the whale knows what it's doing with those bones. It's a design feature to get baby whales. Has nothing to do with them walking around on land. Snake, your turn.
So, I mean, the loss of features is fully explainable by young Earth creationism ideology. But I didn't mention in when I was talking about the whales, the reason this tipped them off, the Pakicetus tipped scientists off that it was a whale ancestor, was not even the transitions between them that smoothly and in the right times showed that there were links along every single spectrum, or along the whole spectrum between modern whales and the Pakicetus. They have a particular ear bone in their skull, which today is only found in mammals, only in whales, and no other mammal, no other animal on Earth. It has this particular ear bone, and so do all of the transitional whale forms. So not only is it possible for an animal to enter the water and over time start to rely more on its tail for locomotion instead of its legs, and possible for it to lose its legs, but all of the fossils suspected of doing this have a particular telltale sign that only whales today have. And so there's just so many things just coming together all in one confluence. That, yeah, like the comment said, there's the pelvic transition as well. I showed an animal with legs that I think it was the Myocetus that had substantial legs that were smaller, but the pelvis was disconnected. Actually, that was the Dorodon. Myocetus still has substantial legs and pelvis, but the Dorodon has tiny little legs with little fingers, so yet it looks almost entirely like a whale. So these hind limbs are not doing the same thing as whale limbs, and yet we see this transition of smaller and smaller limbs anyway to the modern forms where they don't even have fingers on them anymore.
Okay, thank you for the response, Taylor. Christopher, question was for you. Get the last word, my good man.
I saw Richard Dawkins. He actually wanted to show how some kind of ancient land dwelling creature had nostrils, okay, on the front, and then as you progress up the fossil record, the animal kind of changes and it kind of moves up until you eventually have the blowhole of the whale. But the creatures that have this kind of ascending nose, I forget what they call them, but I believe that you can find them alive today. There are creatures like this that sort of the nostrils kind of ascend up, and you can certainly produce a huge, if you had something with nostrils and you wanted to get them higher up on the snout, you could definitely do that with artificial breeding experiments. Bottlenecking catastrophes in nature could do this with animals to where they'd get some interesting features, like Hovind likes to mention, the toy chihuahua, but that doesn't make the creature, something else than it already is. You've just taken the genetic information to the threshold, to where, and there is a limit where it can't go any further. You can't get wings to be bred on the Kentucky Derby horses so they can fly around the track and win it in 10 seconds. That's it.
Okay, appreciate it. So here's another super chat from SWE, putting my kids through college. Appreciate it. So here we go. Another question for you, Chris. She's coming at you. How do you explain flatworms that are internal parasites? They all have a simple morphology and are said to evolve from more complex free-living worms.
Mm-hmm. Well, a flatworm and a free-living worm, I'm not up to, I don't know anything about flatworms or free-living worms, but I know that there are some worms in the fossil record, I'm sure. So you wouldn't be able to show any evolution there of worms, because you're just going to find a big thing of worms. If you're going to find one at all, it's pretty hard to preserve a worm because it's so soft. But jellyfish and all kinds of stuff like that are preserved. The fact that you would find one at all would probably be evidence of a global flood, rapid burial, but you're definitely not going to find a worm evolving from anything else. You just find a worm, and it's isolated in the fossil record from other things that are not a worm. And that would show ecological zonation. I'm not sure that you could breed a worm to be as big as an anaconda. I don't think that's possible. So there's obvious a limit, and you wouldn't be able to get a dog as small as a flea. So genetic limitations are impossible to avoid with worms. It doesn't matter what kind of worm you're talking about. It will always be a worm. I'm not up to date on the information specifically you're talking about with the internal parasites, and yeah.
No worries. Appreciate the response. Taylor, anything you want to add to that?
I think the question, at least how I'm seeing it, is going toward what is the limit, because the flatworm parasites are a completely different ecology, completely different lifestyle. One might say a different kind of worm, and yet fully within the rules of creationism, all these things are capable of happening, because again, this is like supposedly loss of information or loss of complexity, because the apparently the free living worms are more complex. But again, so what is the limit? Is a worm able to become parasitic? It, Chris mentioned size. I think we can all agree you can't get a dog the size of Texas. So, and you can't get a dog the size of a flea. But so size, yes, that's always brought up. But there's the question of what is the limit to shape, which is far more complex, because we know that the shape of bones, the shape, size, orientation, location, number of bones, of muscle groups, down to chemical groups, those are all malleable. So that's a much more complex question than whether you can get a worm the size of an anaconda. Yeah, those are just my thoughts.
Taylor, thank you. Chris, question was for you, brother. You can have the last word. Go ahead.
All right, so the size is like limited. You would agree that the size is limited, but you would disagree that the shape of the creature is limited, that the morphology basically is endless. The possibilities are, endless. So if you wanted to, you could change the shape of a worm. I don't know how you could do that, but either way, if you're going to try to go from a worm to a non-worm, you may have some slow modifications that you need to attribute to the worm, but it's only going to go so far. Any breeding experiment will show you this. You can, and I'm trying to get you to see it. So, in bacteria, there's tons and tons of bacteria, and they've been doing the same experiment for probably over 100 years now, where they try to get different kinds of bacteria, and it's just obvious that even if you have these slow modifications that appear to be limitless, you will reach a boundary. And the farther away that you get from the norm when you artificially breed anything, the more problems you're going to have. So it's not like a beneficial mutation. If it's going to be a mutation that's going to change the organism completely, it's going to totally disrupt the DNA. And today, harmful mutations develop into cancer and all kinds of diseases. If you're off one chromosome, you're probably going to be born with some kind of mental handicap. So it's not good to have those kind of changes, especially over many generations, because then the gene pool gets overloaded with them. We have a heavy gene pool right now because all the mutations that we've inherited from our ancestors. It's not good for the organisms, and it's not going to add complexity to change it. That's it.
Well, I want you to have the last word, but I want to clarify. I don't think the change is unlimited. There are definitely limitations for shape. It would be the limits of traits of the parent generation that are modified. And so, yeah, modifications of parent generation. That's it.
Go ahead, Chris, if you want the last word, brother.
That's fair enough for me. We can move on to the next question.
Okay, appreciate it, guys. Great questions from the audience tonight. So I think we'll wrap it up with one or two more. Next one comes in from Tanya Brown. Question for Snake. You gave lots of examples where we see organisms losing something. Do you have any examples of the other way? Fish developing lungs or snakes growing legs?
Yeah, let me share real quick. Yeah, so I guess I'll use birds for this example. Obviously, evolution states that birds are dinosaurs, so there's a long history of feathers evolving in dinosaurs, from scale feathers, from little fuzz feathers, and like sharp bristles that are scales, because there have been several experiments that show that scales and feathers are developed with the same chemical pathway from the same progenitor cells. And my slide for the other thing is you can convert scales to feathers, even in animals that don't have feathers naturally. But the way I would explain that is a bearded dragon's beard, those spikes on them. I've had a bearded dragon. They're actually pretty soft because they're scales. They're just sharp scales that are changed in shape. So that goes back to what is the limitation of the change in shape. So if you think about it as like kind of a 3D printer, the scale just keeps growing in a certain direction, so you can get an elongated scale. The genes that govern how wide the scale is can also be mutated without killing the organism, and you would get like Culindodromius, which has very long but thin scales, and that chemical pathway can also be mutated to put breaks within those that kill off cells, which can make the scale fan out, and we get feathers. The other thing I'll mention is that the medial twist in the perching claw of birds, which the Archaeopteryx does not have, but the Archaeopteryx has substantial feathers and starts to show signs of fusing of finger bones, which it would support the formation of a wing. And the later animals that are almost identical to Archaeopteryx do have this perching toe, which has been shown to be able to be very easily mutated in birds today. So, using the kind of logic that I've laid out for the rest of the debate, yes, this would indeed show a gain of traits among birds.
Appreciate it, Taylor. Christopher, we'll give you a chance. Go ahead if you had anything you wanted to add.
The Archaeopteryx is a bird. It's not like something that's on its way to becoming a bird. It actually can fly. You can look at a bird skeleton and compare it to the Archaeopteryx, or however you say that crazy word for that crazy bird. Anyways, you can compare the two, a bird skeleton, Archaeopteryx, and they're the same. So it is not. I guess you could call it the dinosaur if you wanted, because it's living with the dinosaurs. So maybe it's like a bird that lives with the dinosaurs, whereas the other birds, maybe they're off somewhere else flying around. But if you find features within the dinosaur scales that resemble the features of a feather, it's not necessarily gonna prove that that the dinosaur had feathers, but rather that there is a similarity in between scales and feathers. If you dramatically change the features of the dinosaur scale, you can get a bird out of it. If that were possible, it's just not. I think that's all I'm going to say on that.
Chris, thank you. Taylor, what was your question? Quick final word.
Well, there are dinosaurs like Kaihongjuji, Microraptor, that, and including Velociraptor, that do have confirmed feathers, both like fluffy feathers and fully winged feathers. But to reiterate, if Archaeopteryx is a bird, then it's a perfect transitional form again, because it has dinosaur feet and it does not have perching toes. It has wings, but it does not have the twisted medial bones of the perching toes of like the Confucius ornis here, or modern birds, because but they've isolated that gene, which is very simple to kind of twist bones. We know this is possible. So the fact that Archaeopteryx does not have this twisted perching toe, but in fact has dinosaur toes, supports the classification of Archaeopteryx as a transitional form.
All right. Well, you know what? We are coming at the 2.5 hour mark, so we will wrap it up there. I do appreciate all the questions that have come in. I apologize if we could not get to your question, but as always, time flies by. These debates are important. And Chris, Taylor, thank you so much for giving us your time for this debate on transitional fossils. As we always do, some quick final thoughts, final words. Again, thanks so much. Chris, let's start with you. First time here doing a formal debate on the channel. Final thoughts, final words, and if you'd like to, plug your channel, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I've done enough plugging, but I appreciate you, Donnie, taking time. You're a real busy man. I think that you're going to be just like Ken Hovind one of these days, be as busy as he is. If you can get those kids grown up and moved out and the dog dies, you could be home free and taking calls all day long. And I can't wait for that day to come. So God bless this channel. And Snake, I hope that you find the Lord one day. I'm not sure if it's still possible for you to do as far as you've gone away from the Lord, but if it is, I pray that day comes that you know Jesus and that you accept salvation without works to be saved, and then you get to work after you get saved so that you can get more people saved, because otherwise they're going to hell. And that's the sad truth of it, but it is the reality. And the Bible is not only the infallible, inerrant, inspired word of the God, but it is scientifically accurate in every detail. Thank you.
Christopher, I appreciate those kind words. God bless you as well. And again, thanks for giving us your time for this important debate. Taylor, over to you. Thank you. And final thoughts, final words?
Yeah, I mean, if your God wants me to come into the fold, he'll figure something out, I'm sure. But I'll probably still believe in evolution. But that's just how it goes. So, but yeah, thank you guys. It's fun as always.
Okay, Taylor, thank you. Again, to the audience, thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for asking some fantastic questions. As I usually do, we got a lot of going on the channel and in the ministry. So I am going to stick around for several minutes after I let these gentlemen out. So you both earned the night off. Again, appreciate you doing this debate. So Chris and Taylor, we will chat with both of you a little bit later. Blessings. All right, there we go. Another one in the books. Christopher Silvius versus Taylor from the Snake Was Right YouTube channel. I think it went well. I think it was entertaining. It was engaging. A couple technical difficulties, near the beginning, but once those were resolved, everything was smooth, moving forward. And as we like to do during moments of technical difficulties, we have some fun. That's a lot better than having dead air. So again, thank you so much to everybody. Logical, plausible, probable. Last minute, he jumped out a portal or a wormhole or whatever, and apparently he's having an after show. So I would say the temptation is there. I may just join in probably a couple hours, though. I got to get some food, maybe refill on the coffee. And usually LPP's after shows are fun. LPP, you're going to be a busy man, brother, because we have a ton of debates for June. in the Evolution Debate Challenge series, guys. So if you're in the chat here, pay attention, because June is going to be fun. Today's the last day of May. May was a ton of fun. I think we've now done about 30 debates in the 2022 Evolution Debate Challenge series, and I just scheduled a bunch more. So since Snake just debated, might as well announce this one. Same topic, transitional fossils. So what we're doing now with the Evolution Debate Challenge series is, for the first about 5 months, from January to May, we did most of our debates titled, "Is there reasonable evidence for evolution? Is evolution a valid scientific theory? Evolution on trial?" Those were, more or less the titles. Now what we're going to be doing is taking one line of evidence, something really, really specific. Transitional fossils, vestigial structures, junk DNA, ERVs, chromosome 2 fusion, phylogeny, whatever. If you're an evolutionist, you're taking the challenge, pick one line of argumentation, okay, one line of evidence, then we're going to debate it, you and Kent. And so this is going to be fun. And Taylor and Kent, they're going to be debating specifically transitional fossils. Do they exist, and do they provide evidence for evolution? So if you're an evolutionist in the chat, you're an evolutionist who's watching this video and you want to take the challenge, we make sure each debate is sophisticated, is fair, is civil, respectful. Shoot me an email and we'll have some fun. So then we've got Endgame. Wade the Wizard, Dr. Dino, their first two debates were probably two of the more memorable debates in the series. And so we got round 3 with these kinds of series. You gotta complete the trilogy. And that's what we're doing. Endgame. It's going to be up there with Lord of the Rings, The Dark Knight. It's going to be up there in terms of epic trilogy. So I know a lot of people are looking forward to this one. Atheist Jr., Kent Hovind. Exact date, I think we got it on the 23rd. We've got so many set, so just make sure you're subscribed. Go to the events section where I have all of these, where I've got all of these scheduled. Now for myself, I've been doing, I've had one so far, Creation versus Evolution Discussion Podcast. I've personally done about 97 or 98 formal debates, but so much going on in the ministry. We just released the evolution, or the ERV handbook, which is currently available. It really is a blessing. All the glory to God. So many people are picking it up every day, a ton going out, and it's currently set, especially to those that want to buy bulk. That's what I've done in order to pass it around to friends, family, church members, so on and so forth. You can pick it up for about $5. So normally, I think in the States, it's like $14. Currently, you can get it for under $5, which is just the printing cost. So, when it comes to these books, we just want them to get out. We just want people to see the truth. We want you to pass it around. So I initially said 48 hours, and I think we'll probably do it for a couple more days. And another thing that I'm doing is updating the books you can see behind me, Special Creation. I've got Benjamin working on a cover variant, updated and expanded, as well as the Independent Origins Handbook. And I would say in the next week or so, some of my main books, Refuting the Critics, Special Creation, Independent Origins Handbook, and, well, of course, the ERV Handbook, I am going to make them all available for printing cost, which will be very cheap. So that way, I've seen how encouraged people are with the ability to buy in bulk the ERV Handbook. You'll be able to do the same thing with those books as well. But again, that'll probably be in about a week once I have them all fully updated and expanded for everybody. As you know, we at For Truth Ministries, we like to leave no stone unturned. So again, back to this, I will be doing, rather than the typical formal debates that I engage in, I'll be doing this podcast. So I had Ken Rock on, and I'm working on getting several others. I'm in the works of setting up Mark Drysdale and myself. We should be discussing, I believe, specifically ERVs. So given how many events we have scheduled, I am going to do my best to fit that in as well. I'm excited for this. So Dr. Jerry Bergman, he's been on the show twice now. We've been having him on about once a week. And so what I'm going to be doing is having him on next month, and I just picked up his book. I wanted to show it off here, but it's actually upstairs in my bookcase. But it's a must-read book, and this is going to be a must-watch presentation. So it's going to be really cool. I love C.S. Lewis, got all his books, and I didn't know this, so this was surprising to me and amazing as well. So C.S. Lewis, the anti-Darwinist, anti-evolutionist. So I didn't know this. And Dr. Jerry Bergman has written an extensive book on it that has gone unchallenged. So he's going to be on here. I believe we scheduled it for the first Saturday in July, which is, I believe, July 2nd. So C.S. Lewis, anti-Darwinist. Save this. Honesty Angel says, I love C.S. Lewis, all his books too. Amen. Amen. So that's why I'm looking forward to that one. I think that one is going to be sweet. So Nick from the Planner Walk YouTube channel, he is also going to be debating. This one's going to be an earlier debate, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I had to work around Nick's time zone difference. So I think he's about 6 hours ahead of us in the future. And so that is scheduled on the channel as well. So make sure, again, you are subscribed. You don't want to miss these. And the 9th, I am pumped for this one, and it's going to come quick. 9 days these days flies by. So that's pretty well tomorrow. Salvation debate, Romans 2:13. Does the Bible teach salvation by faith alone or salvation by faith plus works? Again, that is on the 9th. You don't want to miss out on that one, guys. So make sure you're subscribed. Share around this content. The truth is important. Critical thinking is important as well. And that's pretty much all that comes to mind here. Some of these comments are kind of cracking me up. So love how full of life our live chats are. That's what I like to see. A good, solid sense of humor. You know, we like to be serious on this channel, but I also like to have some fun. And so thank you for joining in. And also thank you for all the questions, all the feedback, all of the engagement, and the super chats and support. So Illogical, Plausible, Probable, he is back. He's out of retirement. And John, I hope you enjoyed retirement. I hope you enjoyed the beach. I hope you enjoyed Hawaii. Well-deserved, well-earned. So that's it. That's all that comes to mind. Again, thanks for joining. Here it is. Dumpster fire. Even if it's not a dumpster fire, LPP, he's a great advertiser. You know, he's the marketing king. So when people hear a dumpster fire, you know that they're gonna show up. So, okay. Well, everybody, thank you so much. And check the description box for the links to tonight's debaters. And we'll see you in 2 nights for a debate between David Preston, CJ Cox on does the Old Testament teach that the Israelites were saved by faith plus works. God bless all.